James Dickey joins us today. He's the chairman of the Texas Republican Party. James, how you doing, man? How are things going there, keeping Texas red?
I am I'm doing well and keeping safe. And man, in Texas, we are doing amazing. We had an incredible goal before this cycle started to register 100,000 new Republican volunteers at the Republican Party of Texas, using volunteers to register new voters. And we have already registered 80,000 new Texas Republican voters on our way to that goal of 100,000. I'm so happy. I'm so excited. The progress we did before things shut down was so important, and the momentum we have. Volunteers are stepping up. People are excited. This is a great thing they can do they know will be important when this too does pass, and it's only a matter of time that it does.
So, James, I'm sorry, but I got to ask you about the elephant in the room. I spent the last 30 years working on Wall Street. Some of my best friends have been on Wall Street longer than me. We saw a phenomenon yesterday with oil prices that's never been seen before. I know some of the best experts in the world. No one has ever seen what happened yesterday. And I would assume, somewhere in there, this craziness with oil has to have some effect on the economy of your state. What insights can you give people on what's going on here with oil?
Oh, it is absolutely devastating. We've seen first time things in the last 10 years. I mean, we saw negative interest rates. That was crazy. And now to see negative futures prices and spot prices on oil, that is just crazy. And the reality is, we did such a good job building up production, and then we saw this massive drop in demand. I mean, I know personally, I was doing 1,000 miles a week on my car at least, and all the fuel that went with that. And then this happened, and it came to a screeching halt. And I know that whole thing has been repeated thousands of times. And I'll tell you, when AOC yesterday tweeted that she just loved to see this, it showed how insensitive and how uncaring Democrats really are. Because, I mean, here in Texas alone, we are talking hundreds of thousands of jobs impacted, blue collar jobs impacted, and not for good. And the process of shutting down wells, and this negative price literally means you have to pay someone to take away your oil, and that's because all the storage is used up, all the demand is not there, and it just points out that we have to figure out how to reopen the economy. The president's already turned that way. Governor Abbott was the first governor to step up and speak out about needing to reopen the economy, and they're absolutely right. We have avoided the millions of deaths that we were talking about being faced with. Now we have to avoid the devastation of having our economy shut down.
So, you guys, I got some good friends down there in Texas, and they tell me that, it was kind of going on a different way in different counties and different areas, different mayors and stuff. But there was never a full lockdown like we're dealing with here in New York.
Right.
I've seen such a disparate response from governors, and it's mostly along party lines. The most leftist and progressive want to keep us on the government dole, locked up in our houses, not using oil. And the more, freedom-loving, patriot, conservative states are like, hey, let's be smart about this, but let's keep our government running. What do you think the federal government can do to try to normalize these guidelines to get our country back open?
Well, the president's doing the right thing of respecting the fact that we do have a federalist system and the governors are more in charge in their states. Each of these states are sovereign. What we need to see is more, frankly, of the mainstream media. You're doing a great job, but the mainstream media needs to be sensitive to and aware of the need to reopen. We've seen it with all the beating that the governor of Georgia is taking for taking basically the same steps that the governor of Colorado is taking. And they're doing the same steps. Georgia's getting beat up. Why? Because Georgia's a Republican and Colorado's a Democrat. Fortunately, Governor Abbott, He can be proud of the fact that we have one of the lowest death rates per capita in the entire country. Texas is blessed in many, many ways, and we have creative, talented people who are going to be able to get back to work as soon as government gets off their throat. And we can do that, and we can do that safely. Now that we can keep people informed and trust our fellow Americans and our fellow Texans, which thankfully in Texas and on the Republican side, we have a long history of doing.
James, I don't know what would make you think an Italian guy from New York in a pinstripe suit is not mainstream media. But we try to give a different perspective here, as you know, and I really appreciate you always giving us some time, and our audience loves your perspectives. But one thing I did want to talk to you about, because I know you're leading an army of volunteers who are boots on the ground. You're signing up new voters, 80,000 new registered voters for Republicans in the state of Texas. So you know the beat of the street. You're not sitting up in some ivory tower somewhere directing. I know you're out there. You're putting 1,000 miles a week on your car. How dangerous is the Democrats trying to force voting by mail into these stimulus bills?
Oh, it is. It is a big thing. It's one of the first things I had to start fighting against, and because it was a multi-pronged attack at the exact same time that Pelosi and Schumer were trying to shove that into stimulus bills, which just goes to show their tradition of not letting a good crisis go to waste, which unfortunately is the way they act in everything. The Texas Democrat Party was doing exactly the same thing. They actually filed suit in state court, filed suit in federal court. They tried to get the governor to allow 100% mail-in balloting. And here's the thing, even Democrat elected people who are in charge of elections know that mail-in ballots are 100% the most susceptible method to both fraud and error. And so sadly, when I talk to folks, what I say is, the Democrats are keeping up their tradition of disenfranchising voters, because every theft of a vote, every subversion of a vote, every fraudulent vote that gets counted, that literally disenfranchises a legitimate voter. And Democrats were all in for disenfranchisement and Jim Crow. They were all in for disenfranchisement before. They are consistently in for it now. To them, power is all that matters. And so they're all in for this. We need to continue to protect. There's nothing more safe. There's nothing more secure than you going in, casting your vote, reviewing your vote, and then leaving and knowing that it's being secure, and not hoping that it makes it from the mail to the election office.
You know, James, I want to tell you, way back in 2009, I was dumb enough to actually throw my 10-gallon in the ring and try to run for the New York City Council here in New York. And I did it as an independent. It was a special election, so that's like, you know, the one outside chance that an independent could have in a special, because there's nothing else on the ballot and it's nonpartisan in our specials here in New York, right? And I learned so much in this process. Number one, we have this arcane system here in New York where you have to get so many signatures to get on the ballot, and then the Board of Elections is controlled by 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, so there's no independent representation. So most times they just shoo these outsiders, they shoo you off right at the Board of Elections. They just challenge all your signatures, right? So ultimately, I funded my own campaign. I didn't take any public matching funds. And I had the wherewithal to beat the Board of Elections. I took them to New York State Appellate Court and got reinstated to the ballot the day before the election. And what that caused was, it was the first election in New York that was, since they went electronic, the whole thing had to be on paper because they couldn't get my name on the ballot. So they had to print new paper ballots the night before this happened. It made case law, right?
Wow.
And I watched closely with my team and the highest paid lawyers I can get my hands on, okay? The way that people can subjectively determine the validity of a written ballot just boggled my mind, and it leaves all kinds of doors open to, you know, basically the Supreme Court gave a monitor to an arbiter to sit there between the parties and decide if the signature matched, if the thing was legible, right? And it puts the balls and strikes back into the hands of establishment people, and depends on who controls the apparatus. But the one thing that I could not believe when you talk about disenfranchisement, there were ballots that no one could decide on whether they were illegible, whether the signature matched, and all this stuff. And there was a pile of them. And they said, okay, we're going to arbitrarily allow some of these, and we're going to arbitrarily disqualify some of these. And what they did was they had the arbiter grab into a pile of papers and rip them in half and drop them over his back into a trash can. And they actually threw American votes into a garbage can because no one could agree whose it was. So to your point on disenfranchisement, we went to a technology age like, a decade ago. And what the Democrats want is they want to go back to a time like in Illinois and Chicago where everything's on paper and it puts the balls and strikes in the hands of the party machines. It's really scary.
It is. I mean, the Democrats have decades of experience of cheating elections and stealing votes in mail-in ballots. And the minute we implemented voter ID, that's another thing. Voter ID in Texas, if you go in to vote, you have to validate that you are John Smith, who is registered to vote. And so you validate that you are that person, then you're able to cast a vote. On mail-in ballots, there's no ability to do that. And so the minute we put in voter ID, Democrats started pushing for mail-in ballots again and started really pushing the law. That's why the law in Texas is pretty severe. The other thing is we have a 2-week window when you can vote. No excuse, no problems. We got a 2-week period where you can walk in and cast your vote. So the idea that we can't safely figure out how to let people vote over a 2-week window is just ridiculous, especially when we're talking about October. We are going to have this figured out. We are going to be past this. Americans and Texans are clever enough, smart enough, determined enough. We will figure out how to get back to something resembling what normalcy by October. It's absurd that the Democrats are arguing otherwise.
So, right here in New York, we have a lot of third parties. We have this thing called fusion voting. And I happen to be the New York State vice chairman of the Reform Party, which is a small third party. But we're not an ideological platform. We're basically for reforming the electoral process, same day voter registration, ballot access, voter choice, initiative and referendum, ranked choice voting, things like this that make it a more fair playing field to get more candidates in front of the people. And one of the things that I've always felt, I'd like to get your opinion because I don't know how this squares with a Texas conservative Republican, but I think if the government of our country really wanted the real voice of the people, they'd hold elections on a Saturday. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing to get more participation?
Well, so that's actually one of the interesting things. One of the arguments of Democrats is if they go to mail-in ballot, they'll get a lot more participation. And it's just not true. Even where they have mail-in ballots, where they mail everyone a ballot in advance, they don't even ask you if you want a ballot. They just mail it to you. And all you have to do is return it. They see very small increases in participation. The bottom line is, not voting is a vote. It's a sign that you just aren't that interested in participating. But on the Republican, conservative, Texan side, we have this 2-week window where you can vote, including on Saturday. And as we've done that, we've seen some increase in voting, but not much at all. And those Saturdays get participation, but we still have more people voting on the Tuesday election day than they vote on the Saturday early voting a week earlier.
So overall, you wouldn't love it?
Overall, I would say the argument that it would get increased participation has been proven to not necessarily pan out.
Got it. I understand that. Yeah, I just feel like even me, I'm like a political wonk. I'm part of a statewide party. And there are times when there's only like a couple of judgeships on the ballot or something, and I'm still at my job in the city at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, and then, a client says, hey, can we grab a drink or something like that? And
Yep.
I'm always trying to exercise that privilege that I have. But there are times that I've missed a vote on small things because it's on a Tuesday I didn't get there in the morning, and it's on a Tuesday and there's only a couple of small races. So I've always felt like maybe, people would, you say if they don't vote, then it's like they voted, they don't care enough. I think, you have the stats, but I always thought, maybe it's ideological to think that more people. I always take my kids with me. When they were younger, I used to take my kids to the polls and say, hey, look, guys, this is what you do. You walk in and you pull the lever, and and I just felt like, well, maybe there would be more youth participation because parents would teach their kids something if it was a Saturday. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I've taken my kids on those Saturdays. I've also taken my kids on other days as well. And there have been plenty of times that I've used the Saturday of early voting to be able to vote. I love what we do in Texas, where we offer multiple days, because, as you said, it can be really, it can just work out that you just can't make it. And it wasn't necessarily an intentional decision. I just know from the statistics that all that seems to wash out.
Got it. Well, look, if anybody knows it's you, I want to thank you very much for joining us, James. You're always so generous with your time and your knowledge. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you and the family are staying safe. Hopefully we can get the oil business back on track so that Texans can get back to work.
We absolutely will. As we get our economy back going, the oil business will come back, and it will be a good thing. God bless you guys, and
let's hope.
Stay safe.
God bless you too. Thank you, James. That's James Dickey from he's the chairman of the Texas Republican Party. He's also the driving force behind the hashtag Keep Texas Red campaign. And, these guys are doing, I don't want to mix God and politics, but they're doing God's work down there, making sure that Texas stays red.